How much does it cost to publish in 2024? Such a difficult question, but it's a question that I get asked a lot. The truth is that costs are variable. That's like asking how much does it cost to buy a shirt in 2024? You could buy the least expensive shirt or you could buy a multiple $1,000 designer shirt. The same thing is true with self-publishing. You have lots of choice, you have lots of options. So the question I prefer isn't how much does it cost, but rather how much do you need to spend in order to set yourself up for success? So, we're going to walk through some of the expected costs of self publishing. I'm going to give you some of my best advice, and I'm going to give you a free tool to help you set your own budget today. So, let's get started. Welcome back to Heart Breathings. My name is Sarra Cannon, and I have been self publishing since 2010. I have about 30 books that I have written so far, and I started my very first book with a $50 budget, and I self published with 50 bucks. And you could still technically do that, or even for free today in 2024. But the market isn't what it was back in 2010. There were a lot less tools on the market. We had to format for free because there wasn't any software that we could use back then. Also, visibility was a lot easier in 2010 than it is in 2024. So, a lot of people publishing today can expect to spend some budget on advertising, visibility, and you really need to have a well edited manuscript and a cover that looks professional. So, how much do you need to spend? We're going to go over some of that today. So, one of the first things that you need to do is have a research and understanding of all of the potential costs, and then weigh your most ideal budget or most realistic budget against some of those costs to decide where it's best for you individually to spend your money. So, a lot of people understand that we need edits and we need professional cover artists, but what you might not be thinking about is needing a mailing address, setting up an LLC. Do you need ISBNs? And is that something you want to pay for? And if you don't have an overall view of what your realistic budget is, what a comfortable budget is for you, it can be really easy to go over budget really fast on things that weren't as important. So, the most important thing that you can do is take a holistic view of every place that you might want to spend your money and make a decision about what is your MVB, your minimum viable budget. What is realistic for you to spend that feels really comfortable? And where's that money coming from? Is it a monthly budget that you'll need to spread out over time? Is it an upfront sort of savings that you have, or you want to have this amount of money saved ahead of time? Or is someone else helping you self publish? Are you going to need to publish on an extreme budget? Every single person watching this video might have a different budget, and you might have a full-time job that's going to fund your self-publishing, or you might have a partner that's going to fund your self-publishing, or a parent, or you might have no help at all and you need to publish as lean as you can. But one of my biggest pieces of advice, besides understanding all the costs up front so that you can really prioritize what's most important before you get underneath a budget that doesn't actually serve you, is to make sure that you don't go into debt on your very first book. Most authors are not going to make money on their first book. That money starts to come in once you've published books 2, 3, 4, and you start to build a readership. This is one of the reasons why in one of my latest videos, I gave you some harsh advice to try to stick to a single genre or a single subgenre, if you can, even a single series when you first start publishing. That's not just advice for my own entertainment. It's really advice for how do you start making a profit as quickly as possible. Because if you spend all of your money and you go deep into debt on book 1, how are you going to afford edits and cover art for books 2 or book 3? The only way you would be able to afford it is if book 1 made enough money to earn out whatever that debt was, and then in addition make a profit. And that is a really big ask for your first book, and it's putting a lot of pressure on your shoulders. So what I usually recommend, and some of my biggest advice, is to budget out your first 3 to 5 books and start thinking not just what it's going to cost to get your business set up and publish that first book, but how can you spread your budget logically and reasonably over your first 3 books, because the majority of authors are going to need at least 3 books before you start to see a profit. And that's just the way it is. A lot of people might take them more books than that. And some people are going to be lucky enough to make a profit off their very first book. But your expectations are going to go in line with how trendy is your genre, how good is your book and what other things are you doing to market, like social media or advertising? How great is your cover? There's a lot of variables involved here. And while I wish I could give you a perfect answer of you need X amount of dollars to self publish, that wouldn't really serve you for me to do that. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a worksheet to fill out where I encourage you to start with the question: how much can I reasonably invest in the first year of self publishing or in my first 3 books of self publishing? Some of you are going to hold back books so that you can publish them very quickly. And some of you, it might be your very first year, you publish 1 book or 2 books. But depending on your own publishing strategy, how much can you afford to invest or save up within your first year to spend on those first few books? Not how much do you need, but how much do you have? And that is a really good place to start, because since all of these costs are variable, you could literally publish for free, or you could publish for $30,000 a book. And the sky's the limit, but also there are no necessary upfront costs. Publishing for free might not be putting your best foot forward, because you might not be able to produce the type of cover and edits that you would need to catch readers' attention, but it is possible. It doesn't cost anything to upload your book to Amazon. You can use their free ISBN for your paperbacks. You could get a free cover using stock photos that are from a free website. There are lots of ways that you can publish for free, and we aren't going to go over all of those today. But if you would like a special video in the future about how to actually self publish on an extreme budget or completely for free, let me know, because there are ways to do it and there are tools out there that can help you. But putting your best foot forward means getting a professional cover, getting some edits for your book, and putting your best possible book out there, but staying as lean as you can for your individual situation so that you don't get yourself into a place where you've published 1 or 2 books and you can't afford to continue publishing. So, what we're going to do now is we're going to slide over to that free worksheet that I'm going to give to you. This is something that I give as a resource to my students in Publish and Thrive. And of course, we cover all of the decisions that you would need to make in your career. And we go into these in depth, which I won't be able to do here. But if you do want to join that course, it can be one of the biggest investments in your career, because we cover literally everything you need to know to get started in the very best way for yourself, including creating that strategy, creating your budget, and figuring out where best you need to spend your money. So if you're interested in joining Publish and Thrive, we start on Saturday, August 3rd. The link will be down below if you're interested in more. But let me share with you this free worksheet, which I'm going to give to everybody here who wants to use it. You'll find a link to it down below in the description. All you have to do is sign up for my newsletter. In my Heart Breathings resource library, or if you're already on my list inside your email today, there's going to be a link to click for the Heart Breathings budget worksheet. When you click on that, it's going to prompt you to make a copy so that we're not all editing on the same one, but then you'll have your own copy of this and you can download it or use it as you wish. But this is the spreadsheet that is really going to look through your budget for books 1 through 3. Now, what you could do is you could say, all right, starting from this moment, I'm going to save up about $500 a month for the next 6 months, which would give you a starting budget of $3,000. And you could, of course, go ahead and be spending some of that each month on your setup costs or on book 1, and then more money will come in from book 2. But the point of budgeting for 3 books at a time is so that you don't end up in a situation where you've got book 1 published, it's not really earning out what you spent on it, and you can't afford edits or cover art for book 2 until book 1 makes money. But the way that self publishing works is that your biggest marketing tool is going to be your next release, your next book, especially if it's in that same series. So if you can't afford to publish that next book, book 1 is never going to make as much money as it could. And so just understanding that about indie publishing. The same is true and this budget becomes a lot less useful if you're publishing 3 books, but they're all in different genres. So you have 1 sci-fi, 1 romance, and 1 children's book. This budget isn't really going to probably any of those books earn out. It needs to be something that works in synchronicity with each other, something that works in synergy where each book helps the previous book sell a little bit better. And of course, this is all strategy that we cover in Publish and Thrive. But if you have any questions, I do answer all my own comments down below, so feel free to leave them. So let's say 6 months, you can save up $500 a month from your job. You start with a $3,000 budget. Or you might be somebody on a more extreme budget and you say, all I've got is $500. So how do I plan for that? And what you'll see is that I've listed out all the typical costs that you might spend on your upfront costs or your setup costs for your business, and then each book, what is the typical things that people tend to spend money on. But I haven't filled any of these out for you because, like I said, it's all variable. You could spend $5,000 on cover art, or you could spend as low as $50 on a pre made cover. And I can't really tell you in a simple YouTube video where you should spend your money, but some of it's going to depend on what are your personal weaknesses and what are your personal skills. Because if you're really great at creating your own cover art and you already have Photoshop, you could make a cover for almost nothing. But also, if you are really great with edits and you have wonderful self edits and you have a great critique group, and a sister who happens to be a professional editor, you might be able to do $0 for edits. But if your grammar is terrible and you need a lot of help with plot, you might need several $1,000s for edits. And we're not going to go into all the typical costs here because that would make a multiple hour video. But if you guys want a series on the cost of self publishing and what I recommend, definitely leave that in the comments so I know what to make content on in the future. But again, also, if you join my Publish and Thrive course, you will get access to all of that as part of the course. But let's say you decide on your minimum viable budget, something that feels lean, that feels possible for you, that feels achievable. And let's say it's something like $4,000 for the first year of publishing. You might not have, like I said, all of that up front, but it's something you're going to save for gradually over the course of the year based on how much per month you can afford to put into it from your other job or from other income that you have coming in. Some of the setup costs that I recommend, I have put an asterisk by the things that I personally think are the most important, but you can choose what you want. So I always recommend that people meet with an accountant to really discuss your personal situation about whether you should set up an LLC, how you should set up your bank accounts, and what your personal situation is with your taxes. But you don't have to. But if you did, let's say it might be about $175. Do you want to start an LLC or have a DBA that you want to register your PIN name with the state or with your country? You might want to spend money on that. There's accounting software if you're going to do your own bookkeeping. I personally just do mine in Google Sheets, so I don't pay for accounting software. Publisher Rocket is a keyword search tool from Kindlepreneur that is really good. That's about $99, I believe, for lifetime access. You might have dues or memberships if you want to join like RWA or Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. We're at Heart Breathing, so of course there might be planners and other office supplies which become a business deduction if you're using them for your work. Right now, we're not going to budget for that because that might be already part of our normal spending. ISBNs are something that can get really complicated, but just understand as a brief explanation, ISBNs are never required for ebooks. You don't need them for ebooks. So if you're going to start just with ebooks alone, you don't need ISBNs. However, if you are going to publish paperbacks, hardcovers, and audiobooks, you will need an ISBN, but you can use the free ISBNs offered by KDP or Ingram Spark. So that can be a free cost if you're on a budget, or if you have to buy your own, it could be something like $150. I'm not sure what the current prices are, but if you buy just one, it's a lot more expensive than if you buy like a bundle. When I first started, it was $1,000 for 1,000 ISBNs. I'll probably never use them all, but I went ahead and invested in that. But you could do this for free as well. Book Funnel is something I really should put a little asterisk by here because it is so helpful. It's an online service that you can use to deliver your ARCs and also to deliver your reader magnet to your newsletter. It starts out at only $20 a year. So I highly recommend it to everybody because it's a good way to start building up your newsletter. If you're going to do a website, you typically need to pay for some kind of hosting. So Squarespace is a monthly fee. If you use something like Bluehost, like I use for my WordPress website, it's somewhere around $300 a year. There are other options for websites that you can do for free. When I first got started, like I told you, I started for $50 on my cover art. I used a free blogger website, and I actually did use more than $50 because I also spent $10 a year or something. Maybe it was only $5 on a domain name, sarahcannon.com, but I think I actually didn't do that until about a year in. So another thing to remember about your budget is you don't have to start with the most ideal thing. You can start with something that's a little bit less than ideal that is helpful for your budget. And then you can iterate and add things on top. So maybe you don't start out with an expensive website, but maybe you add one later. Maybe you don't have author branding at the beginning, but you add it in later. So author branding, let's say, is zero. Formatting software is software like Vellum for Mac or Atticus, which can work on any device, where you can go in and easily format from a Word document. This is also something you can do for free inside Readsy or Draft to Digital or inside Word. There are lots of ways to do it for free as well. If you buy Vellum or Atticus, it's going to be between $150 and $350. Writing software would be something like Scrivener, editing software, something like Pro Writing Aid, which might help you save on edits or proofreads down the road. I put mailing address in here as well, because what some people don't know is that if you're going to send out a newsletter, you legally have to include your mailing address in that newsletter at the bottom. And this is a legal requirement. You usually don't want to put your home address on here. So, for that reason, and for other business filings, you might want to have a mailing address that is not your home address. So, you could do this for free by either using your own address or seeing if your accountant or other someone registered for your business will allow you to use their address. Or you could use a mailing list service like ConvertKit that allows you to use their mailing address. But if you have to do this for yourself, it's going to potentially be maybe about $100 a year to use a virtual mailbox. Or if you have to use a UPS store or a PO box, it might be more like $300 to $600 a year. Newsletter itself, a lot of times you can get for free until you have up to 1,000 subscribers, and then you're going to start paying monthly. But hopefully, the more subscribers you have, the more money you're making to be able to put into your newsletter. Computers or other tech, if you have to buy a laptop to get started, books or other resources. So let's say you want to buy something like self-editing for fiction writers so that you can learn how to edit your own books better. You can use that as $25 or whatever those books might be. Courses, something like Publish and Thrive, you can get started for as low as $45 a month if you want to get started with that course. Over the course of 6 months, if you were saying, I don't know what 45 times 6 is, but let's just say the course in and of itself is $499 if you pay in full. So you can see very quickly how just these few little things like a website and a course that you want to take or other things that are going to set you up for success could already put you $1,000 in on your investment. But look at it this way, you're starting a business, right? Now, if you were using a traditional publisher, some of this stuff like a mailing address, a website host, an accountant meeting, you're going to need anyway. So these are considered just your startup costs. And if you were starting a restaurant, you'd need maybe $1 million to get started. So it is overall a really low cost thing. But if you needed to, you could use a free website. You could not take my course. You could use your own home address if you needed to, or like your aunt's address or somebody you had permission to use. And you could cut down on some of these costs. So that's why I say these costs are variable, and it really just depends on the amount of money that you have to spend. So what you could do is just buy your self-editing book, sign up for BookFunnel, and now you've brought that $1,200 down to $45. Is this setting yourself up for absolute success? If that's all the money you have, I would rather you spend less and don't put yourself in debt so that you can continue to publish without stress on you than to go into extreme debt. But if you can afford it, spend the money on these places that I've said are most important. Books, then we have 3 books to create. And the typical costs for books are like your cover art, your graphics, and other stock images you might need, your edits, advertising, swagger giveaways, and other expenses that you might have to have for like your different advertising or things that you might want to do. So, cover art, again, you could get a pre-made cover for as little as $50. And that would be going into some Facebook groups or Googling fantasy pre-made covers. And some artists are just getting started, can do it as low as 50. But this is also something that if you wanted to have a custom photo shoot or an artist create it, you could spend as much as $5,000 on a cover. I personally would not recommend that you spend thousands and thousands of dollars, because you're not going to get that money back, because a lot of readers aren't going to know the difference between that $50 cover and that $5,000 cover if it matches the genre. There are other things more important than spending thousands and thousands of dollars on a cover. However, custom covers can be somewhere around $500 to $900. Even if you're not using custom photo art, you're talking about an artist who's creating these for you. My cover artist typically charges about $650 per cover. So if we're budgeting out for multiple covers, you can see how quickly, once we get 3 covers done, this budget really starts to add up. But if you haven't spent a lot getting started here in the beginning, you can afford to spend that money on your covers. The next most important place, and really there should be an asterisk by this, is your edits. Edits are super important to put your best book out there. And I've talked about this in previous videos, so I won't go deep into it. But if you want to hear a little bit more about editing and the different types of editing, I will link below a playlist that I have and a workbook that you can download for free about how to edit your book. But I will say that some of the costs that I go through in that video from multiple years ago have gone up. So editors are getting more expensive, just like everything in our world right now is getting more expensive. So if you need a developmental edit, you're looking at between $1,000 and $3,000 typically. Copy or line edits, which are usually interchangeable, where they're going to go line by line through your book, are typically going to cost you between $500 and $1,500. And then proofreads are going to be anywhere from $100 to, again, $900, $700 each, depending on the person that you use, their expertise in your genre, and just how much they cost. Editors can also sometimes take up to a year to book. So this is really something that you need to think about in advance. What's your budget? And then start asking around and finding an editor that can work in your budget. However, and this is going to be controversial, if you have to go into extreme debt that's going to stress you out in order to afford an editor, it might be better to self edit your book or to work with critique groups or beta readers to try to get your book to the very best that it can be, so that all you have to do is use a proofreader. When I first started out, I used a very good, very detailed critique group of people that we went through my book with a fine tooth comb, and I did the same for them. And I bought books like Self-Editing for Fiction Writers and Strunken White's Elements of Style. And I learned the tools to edit my own book as best as I could. And then I had my husband proofread, and he's a pretty detailed reader. There were still some errors, but it wasn't enough to turn readers off. Then when I started making a profit, I reinvested in copy edits for each of my books. And now that I make enough money off of my books, I can always afford to have those copy edits. I personally don't use developmental edits, but some people who really need help with plot and character development might need developmental edits. So really think about your own skills and where you can save money and where you really need to invest it, and then work within your budget. But let's say for a typical person, you're going to spend minimum of $500 on edits. So once we start putting that into our budget, you can look and see that now we only have $500 left. So where would we spend that? Now, I personally, of course, would recommend that you spend it on Publish and Thrive, because that's going to save you so much time and stress, and it's going to keep you from making mistakes. But if you're looking at a 6-month budget, you're only looking at about $250, $240, somewhere around there, for using the payment plan. So that can cut some of those costs. Now, a lot of people will say, well, you got to advertise book one pretty heavily, but you don't actually need to advertise book one. That money would be better spent, in my opinion, advertising book two, or advertising book one when book two comes out. And we go through this, I call it the 4-step indie marketing framework. We go through this marketing process in Publish and Thrive. But if you're interested in hearing about it more here on my YouTube channel, let me know as well. So then you could split that budget. Instead of advertising for book one, you wait for book two to be ready to come out, and then you drop book one on sale and you advertise it when book two comes out. And then you'd have another little bit of budget to advertise when book three comes out. And hopefully at that point, you're making some profit that you can reinvest in your advertising. Some people are going to want to do influencers or pre-order incentives, and you're going to want to have swag or giveaways. But another option for you, if you want to do some of those like swag or special editions, is to run a Kickstarter, which then could add to your budget, where you say, okay, I have $4,000 of my own, but I'm hoping that I can make an extra $1,000 off of a Kickstarter. So now you have a $5,000 budget, and you can spend that over here on heavier edits, $1,000 on edits, and maybe swag and giveaways. You would have an extra $500 to spend here getting that special stuff made for yourself. So it can be a little bit stressful to go through this process and figure out where is it that I need to spend my budget. But this is why I highly recommend that you start with a number that feels comfortable to you for your situation. Even if it's just $500, how can you make that work over the course of all of these different things? Where can you cut back on expenses and save up for later? You might even want to take some of these things and leave yourself notes of saying, like, author branding, when I earn $1,000, I'll do this, right? Or you could put them in order and say, this is my, like, I can't afford it at launch, but this is my number one priority once I start making money. The formatting software is number two, getting an accountant is number three. And you could prioritize these. And then every time, it's almost like a little game. Every time you make profit, you reinvest in one of these other things, which then become also tax deductible against your income. So you'll owe less taxes. So this is really the process of going through and figuring out your budget, but there is no one number. When it comes to how much do I spend on my books, I spend about $3,000 per book these days. But like I said, I got started with $50 and I've made almost $2 million in profit now. So for wherever you're sitting right now, don't give up. Don't lose hope. There are always ways to make it work within your budget, but also don't go into debt and start thinking long term, not just your first book, but how much will it cost and how much will you need to publish your first three. Okay, that is it for today's video. I hope this was super helpful for you. I wish I could go into this. I feel like I could just do hours and hours on this. So if you have any specific questions, I do answer all my own comments over time. So feel free to leave those down below. And of course, grab your free worksheet down below or in the Heart Breathings resource library. Just click to make a copy and you'll have your own copy of that you could download into Excel or use there in Google Sheets for free. If you want a future video on how to completely publish for free and what tools you could use that are out there for free, let me know. And of course, if you want more guidance on how to self-publish, how to budget, how to strategize your career, and how to market your books, come join us in Publish and Thrive. And I would, of course, love for you to subscribe to this YouTube channel. So I will hopefully see you in my next video, or I'll see you in our kickoff call on Saturday. All my love to you and best wishes as you get your work out into the world. Bye for now.